Ortt. I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I certainly want to thank Joe Olskamp here at Escarpment Arms for hosting us on a very, I'm sure he wishes he didn't have to host us for this, maybe to put some lead down range, but not for this. But he and a lot of other firearms dealers, businesses who sell ammunition, to hunters, sportsmen, to just regular Western New Yorkers who want to exercise and protect their Second Amendment rights. They have had really the damnedest time trying to implement this ridiculous database, ammo database, collection of data for people buying ammunition, which I believe and a lot of others believe is unconstitutional. I certainly know it's unworkable, and we're going to talk about that. I want to recognize my colleagues who you'll hear from. Some of them, Mike Norris is here, Niagara County Clerk Joe Jastrzemski is here today, and Sheriff Mike Filicetti has also joined us. All of these local elected officials, myself, some of them, the sheriff, the clerk, all of us have been very steadfast and outspoken in support of the Second Amendment and in support of common sense sort of answers when we're talking about the Second Amendment or gun crime. The sheriff certainly deals with gun violence. His deputies deal with it probably on a daily basis in some regard. And I think he would tell you, be the first one to tell you, that most of the gun violence that happens in the state of New York is being perpetrated by folks who possess illegal firearms. Okay, they're illegally obtained. Serial numbers are, filed off or whatever it is, but they're illegal firearms. So you can bet your butt that the ammunition they're using is not legally purchased. They're not coming in here to Escarpment Arms to pick up some hollow point 9mm so they can go out and perform their drug dealing activities. It is all illegal. Illegal ammo, illegal firearms. So none of what we're doing is keeping people safer. None of this is going to reduce gun violence. All it is going to do, and by the way, a lot of what we have done hasn't done that. If it did work, we wouldn't keep talking about gun violence. But we keep passing more gun laws because clearly the gun laws we continue to push aren't working. Why aren't they working? Well, I'll tell you why, much like this. Because all they do is deal with folks who follow the law currently. So you're not addressing the population that is committing the violent crimes with firearms. And I could talk all day about the number of things we've done to make it harder for people who commit crimes with firearms to go to jail based on cashless bail and things like that. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about this ammo database, this data collection system that was put in place with the CCIA, the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, that is being challenged in court. It is working its way through the court system, the federal court system, and I have no doubt that ultimately, when it is taken up by the highest court in the land, that court, which struck down New York's previous concealed carry law in the city of New York, they will find much of this law, if not the entirety of it, to be unconstitutional and in violation of the previous order that was issued. But this was part of the CCIA, and to put some historical context to it, even Governor Cuomo, no friend of the Second Amendment, even he did not institute this coming out of the SAFE Act because he said the technology simply was not there to make it workable. And I won't say this very often, but he was right. It's not workable. It's not working. It's not working for our businesses. It's not working for our gun owners. I have had numerous calls from constituents who have been, incorrectly declined an ammunition purchase. Now, it might get rectified after the fact, but they were denied an ammunition purchase when they came and they had to run their background. They have to pay, obviously, I think it's $9 for a pistol permit and $2.50 per time they go in to purchase ammunition. Which is, you can clearly see it's about money, it's a money grab for the state. But they also have to put very personal information to the state police, including their social security, including their sexual orientation. There was a form that someone had to fill out that asked, what in the hell does your sexual orientation have to do with purchasing ammunition? And then, of course, your credit card information. I know some businesses that have actually, they're giving their credit card. So their consumer doesn't have to give their credit card because they feel that the consumer would walk out if they had to actually give their credit information over to the state police and the state of New York. And who can blame them? This process is actually more onerous than the federal background check system that is currently in place, which has actually worked very well, and which, of course, there was no charge at all for anyone, whether it was the gun purchaser, the ammo purchaser, or the business. But that is not what New York State is doing. And again, it's been very onerous. It is not keeping anyone safer. It is making it harder for people to go hunting. It can take up hours or days to get your approval. Not always, but I've had a number of calls from people that has happened to. And of course, very often when you're going hunting, you go and pick up your ammunition in the morning on your way to go hunting, or maybe the day before. So if it takes many days or hours, that can delay, that can kill your planned hunting trip for no reason, for absolutely no reason. And again, I would go back to, this is not keeping people safe. I know there's folks out there who will think, well, this is good. It's in the name of safety, it's all worth it. It's not making anybody safer. This is not about safety. This is about making it harder to own a gun, harder to exercise the right of operating and using that firearm, whether it's for hunting or whether it's just for keeping yourself safe in your own home. Imagine a woman who has her pistol permit or just has a long gun. Imagine, and she has maybe an order of protection, or she's in a domestic situation, and she wants to go and get ammunition to protect herself, and she gets declined, or she's told she's got to wait a day or 2 days. Why? That could be the difference between her being here and her not being here. That's what this is about, in my view. So you're going to hear from Joe because I think that's a viewpoint that is very important. We all know how hard it is to be in business, period, whether you're selling watches, sandwiches, or firearms in the state of New York. It's very challenging, and we are making it even more challenging for someone like Joe, who has to have all these conversations at the point of sale with his customers, longtime customers, who don't understand and can't make sense of these kinds of regulations. I have worked tirelessly with Assemblyman Mike Norris on pro-Second Amendment pieces of legislation. We have talked about this. We have done a joint letter to the governor asking for her to shelve this program. And I think that's important in light of the fact that there are even Democrats in the Assembly who have also written a letter to the governor. Now, these are Democrats. These aren't, crazy right-wing people who think everyone should have a gun at birth. These are people who, in most cases, support gun control. And yet, they are writing a letter to the governor. They've asked her to pause this. I would ask for it just to be shelved the same way it was shelved many years ago, because it is simply unworkable, it is unwieldy, and it doesn't have any tangible benefit from a public safety standpoint. Period. And so there's already records, of ammo purchases many times that are kept by the businesses. That someone comes into a place like this and picks up ammunition and then goes robs a bank. I just don't believe for a second that is what is happening. Certainly statistically, the numbers would back that up. But again, myself and Mike Norris are calling on the governor to shelve this program. The rest of the law is going to go through the courts, and that will be decided by judges, and hopefully ones who are reading the Constitution. But this is just simply, whether constitutional or not, this is simply not working. And it is not keeping anybody safer. So with that, I do want to call up my colleague, someone who is no stranger to this issue, someone who is certainly no stranger to this law, and someone, unlike me, who's a lawyer, so he's probably even better trained and better to speak on the law, the Constitution, and how this runs afoul of that. And that is my colleague, Assemblyman Mike Norris.
Thank you, Senator. And first of all, thank you to the press for being here as well. because it is a very important issue that are affecting law-abiding citizens in the state of New York, which is very burdensome on them. All they want to do is be able to exercise their Second Amendment freely, get their ammunition, and go out and hunt. And this is putting roadblocks to average, hardworking New Yorkers who simply want to exercise their right to the Second Amendment. And it also is being very burdensome on small business owners like Joe. Joe, thank you very much for having us here today, because the bottom line is that sales have already slowed in the last 2 weeks, from my understanding, of these purchases. People stocked up. They're also going to other states to purchase this ammunition and taking revenue out of the state of New York. I want to just mention also, as the senator said, the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, who is no fan of the Second Amendment, he scrapped this program after the SAFE Act when they tried to implement it, and rightly so. The federal background check was already in place by the gun dealers. They run them through the FBI, and that's in place. Now, $2.50 every time you want to come in and buy ammunition on the taxpayer in the state of New York. It was already being done. And the collection of data is very scary in this database, as was mentioned, including Social Security numbers and credit card information. And I don't blame any law-abiding Second Amendment person for not wanting to provide the state of New York, through that database, their Social Security number. I would be concerned as well. And finally, I want to just mention that crime in the city of New York continues to run rapid. But this will do nothing to prevent crime. All this is an attack on the Second Amendment and people who are trying to exercise their free right. As mentioned before, and I'm sure the sheriff will concur, many of these crimes that we see all throughout the city of New York is being done with illegal weapons, illegal ammunition. And I tell you, to spend all of this money on implementing this database, and where these law enforcement officers from the state police, they should be on the streets. These resources should be used on the streets right now to protect law-abiding citizens who are walking around, who are going to school, who are going to businesses. They should not be used on a database that is burdensome, onerous, and there was already a system in place through the federal checks. So again, I want to call upon the governor to scrap this system. I want to thank my colleague, Senator Ortt, for joining me on that letter, for his advocacy on this issue and so many more, and also my colleagues here in local government, including our county clerk, who is a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, Joe Jastrzemski, and our county sheriff, Mike Felicetti, who does a tremendous job protecting the people of Niagara County, and Niagara County Legislator Sean Fody. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Senator Ortt for the next introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sullivan. Thank you very much, Mike, for those words and for your support on this. Our next speaker is someone who really is tasked, maybe not as much in this situation, which I'm sure he's glad about, but most of the time when the state passes new gun control measures, it has a direct impact on the office of County Clerk Joe Jastrzemski and other county clerks across the state, because in New York, that's where the pistol permit certifications, that's where the approval, that's where the process always starts, and they have such an involvement. And thankfully, we have a county clerk who has taken the approach of being very favorable, very supportive of the Second Amendment, and helping more people get their permit, that want their permit, making it as easy as he can, streamlined as he can. He's got a great staff on this, but it's because he shares our support of the Constitution and your right to carry and your right to protect yourself and your family. So I'd like to call up now our County Clerk, Joe Jastrzemski.
Thank you, Senator.
Good morning, and thank you for coming out as well. I'd like to thank Senator Ortt for the invitation here to speak to this morning, and I'd like to thank Joe Oskamp here at Escarpment Arms for hosting us. The senator talked about, this bill here that was just passed that we're all dealing with, and I too wish to ask the governor to put a pause on it and throw it right on out. But with that said, I'd also, as the senator mentioned, I'm the keeper of the records here in Niagara County on behalf of our Second Amendment constituents, and do everything I can to make sure that they are protected. And moving forward over the course of time here, you know, from the SAFE Act to this god-awful law that was passed in 2022 that we're all dealing with, that went into effect on September 4th, to where we're dealing with today, one of the things that I'd like to do is call upon the state police, our state police, who take care of the recertification part of these god-awful laws. I'd like to call on them to kind of fix the inequities that are out there. Under the SAFE Act, it called for 5 years to recertify, every 5 years. Under this awful law that was passed and went into effect on September 4th, those 5-year recertification years have changed to 3 years. There's so many confusions out there. And not only that, it also in that law called for county clerks and the keeper of the records throughout the state as county clerk, if you have a semi-automatic, that you're supposed to recertify with the county clerk every 5 years. I mean, there are so many confusions out there. How can the law-abiding citizen that is a gun owner, that has concealed permit or a semi-automatic rifle, understand what his requirements are? So I call on the state police to fix these inequities. And I also like to call on the state police and make them aware of another thing that's going on. Under the federal guidelines of the Real ID Act, where you have to have a real ID to be able to get on an airplane or to fly domestically or get on an army base, you cannot hold 2 forms of ID. A non-driver ID here in New York State, and have if you're a Florida resident and you have a real ID in Florida with your driver's license, if you have a New York State non-driver ID, which you got to have some form of non-driver ID or a driver's license to be able to recertify with the New York State Police your pistol permit, that will make your real ID compliant driver's license in Florida. They will not let you have that. They will suspend that. So we need to figure out a way, the state police needs to figure out a way to fix that situation as well, because it is going to be burdensome on behalf of our residents here in Niagara County. So with that said, I'd like to call on the state police, and please do whatever you can to fix these inequities. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. At this point, I want to call up our sheriff here in Niagara County. Someone, we're very fortunate not only to have a proud pro-law enforcement county here in Niagara, and that runs from Niagara Falls out here to Newfane and everywhere in between. But I want to thank the sheriff, because he has been a very strong supporter and at times a very forceful critic of laws that he does not feel keep people safe, of laws that he feels infringe on people's constitutionally protected rights, while at the same time advocating for more common sense law enforcement policies that not only protect the people that serve under his command, but also the people that he is duty bound to protect here in Niagara County. So at this time, I'd like to call up Sheriff Mike Filicetti.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I too have heard the complaints from residents. The need for this ammunition check, the cost of it, the delays. I think Joel talked about the delays that have taken place here in this shop. So I get those calls, and I really have no control over the ammunition checks or what New York State imposes. But what I can tell you as the sheriff is my main priority is to look at things and figure out what will make Niagara County safer. What can we do to keep our residents safe, but not infringe on their rights? And I look at this ammunition law, and it makes me shake my head, quite frankly, as I've done repeatedly over the last 3 or 4 years, I just shake my head and I don't know why we are going down the road we're going down. I can tell you that the people that are committing the crimes, the gun crime, the murders, they are not coming to a shop like this to buy ammo and try to go through a background check. That is not happening. So it does nothing to help us in that arena. I need help in other areas. I need them to help pull back bail reform, pull back less is more, pull back raise the age. All the things that they've enacted to tie my hands as a law enforcement officer, they don't want to touch that. But yet they continue to push things forward on ammo checks and things that are going to only affect law-abiding citizens, because as mentioned, the only people following the law, as we know, are the law-abiding citizens. So instead of enforcing the laws that are on the books, that were already on the books, and holding criminals accountable, we'll pass more laws that they're not going to follow. It makes zero sense. And in law enforcement, we just shake our heads because they continue to tie our hands, and then they all look at each other when crime rates go up. It's real simple. When you start locking people up and holding them accountable for committing serious crimes and going after people, instead of waiting for drug results because of discovery laws that have been put in place so drug dealers are out on the street, or because bail reform was put in place and I can't hold anybody and they're back on the street doing what they do, we pass ammunition background checks. It makes zero sense to me. If you truly, truly care about lowering crime rates and taking gun crime and knocking it out of the park, you would actually go back and fix what you've done and change the laws that you've enacted instead of piling on ridiculous laws that do nothing other than infringe on Second Amendment rights for legal gun owners. I believe the senator mentioned there is a minute, and I mean minute, amount of crime that are committed by legal gun owners. Compared to what criminals are doing, it's non-existent. So we really need to get our priorities focused back in this state and go back after what is really causing the problem. That is criminals, illegal guns, and they're committing crimes, and you need to hold them accountable. I think if you do any type of research in law enforcement, you will see when you hold people accountable and when you put them in jail or prison, crime rates go down. This isn't some magic formula. It works. But in this state, we coddle the criminals and we go after the legal citizens and legal gun owners. Something has to change. I hope that we can get something done, and we need to make things safer and go after the people that are committing the crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. So last up, we're going to hear from Joe Olskamp, the owner here at Escarpment Arms, someone I've gotten to know. He's reached out to my office on a number of pertinent issues or issues related to what he sees as a business owner in the arena of selling firearms and ammunition. And I've been here. I've been on the range. That's a great place. But the reason we're here is because he was willing. A lot of times you get business owners, they don't. Joe had the courage to say, you know what, I'm willing to stand up in front of the camera and explain what's working, and nothing is working on this. So what's not working, and why this doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint from his angle. I just wanted to add one thing to what the sheriff said. And he said, I don't know why this is happening. I'll tell you, it's politics. That's why it's happening. Down in New York City, it's very difficult to find someone that owns a firearm, because New York City, as we saw with the law that was struck down, they make it very difficult, if not impossible, to own a firearm legally. There's plenty of firearms, but they're illegally possessed because they make it, and they have made it for a long time, very difficult. Now look, it's a city of 8 million people. I'm not the mayor of New York City, thank God, so I'm not going to sit here and say what works down there. But I can tell you across most of the state, and in my district, certainly in Niagara, Orleans, Monroe, Erie counties, across western New York, the Second Amendment is a bipartisan issue. I hear from Democrats all the time up here that thank me for being a strong voice on this issue, because they own guns. This is not guns and criminals, we've connected those two forever. We forget that there are many law-abiding, good people who own a firearm. They own a shotgun. They own a pistol. They have their carry permit. More people have gotten them because I think there's a concern that one day they might not be able to. And they should. I think that's a good thing. I think we should be encouraging legal, safe gun ownership in this state instead of discouraging it. as we are. And that is exactly what we're doing. In New York City, you could put up any gun control measure, and I suppose it's good politics for the Democrats down there. But I can tell you where I am, it's certainly not good politics, but more importantly, it's not good policy. And that's why we're here today. So with that, I want to call up, again, a friend of mine, a business owner here in Niagara County, and someone who I think does a great job. That is Joe Oskamp.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to start off by expressing my extreme gratitude. I mean it truthfully from the bottom of my heart. Every person that's standing up here has had our back as business owners and gun owners across Niagara County without fail. With Legislator Fody, Assemblyman Norris, the County Clerk, Joe Jastrzemski, the Sheriff, the Senator's office. When we have an issue and call them, they are there for us without fail every single time, so I want to thank them for that. Since the implementation of the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, along with the Supreme Court decisions last year, there's been around 3,000 pages of new requirements, legal opinions, and laws passed that we are on the hook for understanding, implementing, and ultimately explaining to the customers. That is an absolutely insane amount of information to try and pass along to the everyday person. As the county clerk was saying, the SAFE Act's been in place for years. People still don't know they have to recertify their permit from back then. And now we're talking about having to do all this new stuff since then. There's no way to possibly keep up on it. And we are ultimately criminally on the hook for it and at risk of losing the business if we violate it. When it comes to the ammunition background checks and what we've seen, it's been chaotic. There is no phone system to call in. So if you live in a rural area where your internet is not reliable and up to speed, good luck. We've already seen that as an issue. The platform itself stalls, goes into a permanent spinning wheel mode, and you can't do anything with it. As far as the person's doing the checks and trying to purchase things, whether it's the firearms or the ammunition through the New York State system, we've had federal law enforcement officers that are currently on the job, sheriff's deputies, fire chiefs, and other people in positions where they're getting background checked regularly and held to a higher standard, all delayed. For what reason? We don't know. It is an absolute waste of the customer's time. It is nothing more than obstructionary, and ultimately, it's creating a database in New York State that the federal government is not even allowed to have. If you read the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, the federal government is not allowed to keep a searchable database tying guns to their owners. New York State found a way to sidestep that and is creating their own database when the federal government can't even do it. I'm really hopeful that the Supreme Court will ultimately strike all of this down to allow New Yorkers to be able to bring those things back to their homes and protect themselves rather than having to drive down to Pennsylvania before you go on your hunting trip, before having to ask a friend if they have any extra ammo because they need to go to the range to practice before their qualification. Ultimately, New Yorkers are less safe because of this system, and they are not able to properly protect themselves. So I would really like to call on Governor Hochul to pause this until it's fixed, and preferably do the right thing and get rid of this database that is unnecessarily being created. So, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate, again, Joe willing to speak up, because I know, there's a lot of business owners that say, you know what, I'm with you, but I really don't care to be on front of the cameras. But he's a good-looking guy, so he doesn't mind, I guess. But, I just want to close out by saying this. A database being collected with information that the federal government can't use, the question would be, to what end then? To what end? And we should always ask this question in 2023, whether it's on social media or wherever. We should always ask the question, what is happening with my information? Who is using it, and to what purpose? I think I know the answer. I believe, and we've seen this in other ways at local government, where gun owners have been, doxxed, their information has been put up online so people know where the gun owners are. Rob Ortt has a gun. You should know that. I don't mind. I have a gun. You should know that. But a lot of people, I don't know why we're trying to ostracize or create info to know where every gun owner is, as if those legal gun owners are the problem in New York State. But in the minds of some, they are. In the minds of New York City-minded legislators, why do you want to own a gun? That's how they look at it. They look at it as almost suspicious that you would want to own a gun. We know this isn't New York City. We know that when you call the police, call the sheriff's office, as great as they are, they might be 10 minutes away. That might be the nearest patrol car. There's not a precinct around the corner. That's just not the nature, certainly in Niagara. It's definitely not the situation in New Orleans or more even rural counties. And so there's a lot of reasons why we have a proud Second Amendment constituency. And as you heard, this does not keep anybody safer. Maybe it makes you less safe. We're seeing outflow of revenue to other states like Pennsylvania. Certainly if you live in Allegheny County or Chautauqua or you're going there to buy your ammunition. Why would you deal with this? So it's absolutely time for this to be shelved. We're calling on the governor, and the governor, don't forget, Governor Hochul is from Western New York. And I know when she got elected, whoever voted for her or didn't vote for her, there was a lot of at least thought amongst Western New Yorkers that, well, at least she's one of us. She's from Western New York. She would understand these situations or these issues maybe from a different perspective. Once upon a time, I'm old enough to remember when she ran for Congress and was endorsed by the NRA. Maybe a different time. But I'm looking for that person. I'm looking for that Kathy Hochul to remember that. Because once upon a time, she obviously stood up enough for the Second Amendment because she represented a constituency, again, across both lines that were gun owners. And that's why she got that endorsement. And I would ask for her to remember that even as the governor of New York. You're the governor of the entire state, not the governor of New York City. And we want to send a strong message that Western New York is not New York City, and that the Second Amendment, even the Second Amendment, along with the First Amendment and the whole Constitution, is alive and well here in New York State. So with that, happy to take any questions. And again, I want to thank Legislator Fody and my colleagues who you've heard from for being here today. If you have a question for me, you can address it to me. If you have a question for someone else, just identify who your question is directed at.
You guys covered pretty good.
I always love press conferences where there's no questions.
I actually do have one. So you
Yeah.
guys have all been making the mentions that this law and other gun safety laws actually just make it more unsafe for some citizens. But New York State, research on New York State has the second strongest gun laws in the country, but also with the fourth lowest rate of gun deaths per 100,000 residents. So if you want to repeal these laws that through data shows that it's working and it's keeping down gun deaths in the state, what laws would you want to implement?
So I would completely disagree with the premise. So we're talking about, first of all, we're just talking about the second strong. I don't know, who says it's the second strongest, or who says it's the...
It's the Everytime Research.org.
Yeah, Everytime. You know what Everytime is, right? It's a gun control group. So this is a partisan group that has a partisan angle. So I would anything they put out, I'm a little skeptical of because they're coming at it from a very, very specific, point on this issue.
So my question to you is, if these laws aren't working, your opinion is that these laws aren't working and it's making people less safe, then what laws would you want to implement?
This law, we have plenty of laws that make it safe.
What are they?
So right now in New York State, all the laws on the books, and I'm sure the sheriff could even talk about all the laws that we have currently. If you use a gun in a crime, there's additional charges that come along with that. If you use a gun, or certainly a legal gun in the commission of, or if you are dealing in weapons trafficking, there are already additional offenses. Now, before cashier's bail, if you committed a gun in the crime, you went to jail. Now we've seen this where people who are caught with an illegal firearm, I'll put it that way, they're caught maybe in a traffic stop, they have an illegal firearm, they are given an appearance ticket, or they have been given appearance tickets, the gun is taken, but they are back on the street. Now, you can't tell me that is making people safer in the state of New York. The person had an illegal firearm. What do you think they're going to do with that? protect themselves? I mean, is that what they're doing with it? Or are they going to be up to no good? So all the laws that every town and the governor push only affect law-abiding gun owners who are generally, statistically, not committing crimes to begin with. They're not committing crimes with firearms because they're purchasing it legally. That's the whole point. They're not criminals. They're not murderers. They're not robbers. They're not drug dealers. Those individuals are committing illegal acts to start with their illegal firearms. By the way, I would also add that a lot of that data is harder to track than it is with legal gun purchases, right? So you can track my purchases, my background check, my purchase of my Glock, but if I pick it up on the street, you have no idea. You don't know. So that statistic is not in some of those data points as well when they talk about the safest state. Because I would go in parts of New York City, parts of Rochester, and we could go around and talk to constituents there who might tell you, I don't feel like I live in the second safest state as it relates to gun crime. So this is not about, I'm not here to propose more gun laws.
No, absolutely.
I am here, according to every town, citizens are safe. What I'm saying right here, this ammunition database does not make anyone safer. Period. Full stop. This will not stop a gun crime. This will make it harder for a father who's going hunting with his son to go hunting with his son. This will make it less likely that a person will go buying ammunition from him and they'll buy it in Pennsylvania. And you'll have no idea it's even here. It's the same with a lot of things we've done, even other actually gun laws. After the Buffalo shooting at the Top Store, we passed several laws, most of which I voted against, some of which I actually voted for. But they talked about like purchasing of certain types of body armor, what have you. They made it illegal to purchase here, but not illegal to possess. So what happens? You're going to go to Pennsylvania, for a lot of folks, and buy the same thing. You can't buy a natural gas stove. You'll go to Pennsylvania, and you'll buy it there and come back and put it in your house. This idea that you're keeping it out is really naive in a lot of ways. And so all that this is going to do is it's a data collection point. Why? How is it being used in a way that's going to help keep people safe? I can't tell you. The state police can't tell you. Because there's no evidence that we're not cutting off a point of illegal activity that's going on where criminals are coming into Escarpment Arms and buying their ammunition. They're not. So this is a fallacy that more gun laws automatically lead to safer states. That's not the case, especially at a time when we're making it easier for criminals who commit crimes to be back on the street within hours of their arrest, if they're arrested at all. So I'm not going to allow every town to be the arbiter. No, you brought them up. You brought their statistic up. I'm not going to let every town be the arbiter of what is good for gun safety or not. I know that's the space they deal in, but I could bring up, I don't have it in front of me now, I can bring up several other data points from other organizations who have a different view of the Second Amendment than every town in the USA that would have probably a very different take on the laws we've passed here in New York.
When it comes to this database being taken, all the information going to the New York State Police, how secure is that? Or do we even know where it's going, or what's, what do we?
I don't know how secure it is. I'm sure it's as secure or unsecure as any other data collection that the state does, right? I mean, I have to assume there's an IT aspect to it, a certain level of security, but in my experience, government websites sometimes are not as secure as you might think they would be for sophisticated, folks.
I'm just wondering, as they said, we're creating this database.
Right.
A lot of money is going towards the database.
Yeah. So the state police a lot of money is going to the administering of the database, right? There's state police officers and obviously technology and time and effort and manpower that goes behind this. But as far as the digital security piece, that's not, certainly I would never pretend that's my realm. But again, I don't think I can't say that it's less secure, but it's probably not any more secure than any other areas where your information might be on a government website. And so, I think, again, we live in a time when people rightfully should be suspect about how their information is being used, by who it's being used, to what ends. Obviously, the security piece as well. But I think we also live in a world where we just know that information is out there. I'm sure everyone at this point has gotten some letter at some point to their home that says there was a data breach at Target. There was a data breach at whatever your health care provider. Someone there's a data breach, and your information may or may not have been part of that breach, and we're sending you a letter to cover our butt. Right? That's kind of how the world we live in, unfortunately. But that's another concern when the state police are gathering this information. Credit card, Social Security. I mean, shoot, those are two big pieces of info if somebody wanted to steal your identity. But again, that would be the act of a bad actor, of a hacker, or something like that. So that's always a risk, I guess, people take. I think the bigger issue is, why does the state police need information that even the federal government doesn't keep?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
To what end are they using it? I think they're using it to track and know where gun purchases are, who is purchasing ammunition. That's what I think they want to. Now, to what end are they using that for? And we've seen New York State go after. I've seen the Department of Financial Services use their power to go after financial institutions to shut down accounts of people who are in the firearms business. Am I wrong? No. I'm not wrong. I am not wrong. M&T and other banks have received letters from the DFS saying, we would encourage people not to have accounts and money for firearms dealers, gun, let's say a sportsman's club, anything where there might be additional liability. That has happened. That is perfectly. And so you might be the biggest gun control person. You might support no one should have a gun. But I bet you support the First Amendment and not using the coercive power. Now, that happened under the previous governor. That did not happen under Governor Hochul. That was a Governor Cuomo special. I've seen the Attorney General, the current Attorney General, who I guess would have access to this information because she's the top cop in New York State. She specifically went after the NRA to try to bankrupt the NRA because they had a headquarters here in New York City. And she said, I'm going after the NRA. Now, why? Because she doesn't support the NRA's mission and the NRA's politics. So the state of New York has shown a penchant for using politics to drive who gets prosecuted, who they go after. That is happening in this state. Partisan prosecutions, partisan attacks. And you could line up every gun owner in this place and they would tell you absolutely they believe that is a very real possibility. And that is why they don't want their information out there, especially if they feel that they don't need it. If you commit a crime, there'll be evidence to show you committed a crime and you'd be prosecuted. But you're not committing a crime coming in here. Buying a gun and buying ammunition is a legal, protected thing. This is we're giving it the pension. We're giving it sort of the smell that you're doing something wrong, and that is what I object to. I know that's what a lot of other folks object to when we start to almost. I don't want to use the word criminalize. When we start to make it seem like what you're doing is problematic, and so we need to have more information. It's not problematic. It's simply not. And that's where I would, push back on some of my colleagues, that there's a sense that what is happening here, we know more about someone buying ammo than we do about someone buying cannabis, which is still a federal one substance at the federal level. But we have no idea who's buying cannabis because there's more illegal weed shops all over the place. But heaven forbid if someone comes in here and buys a couple boxes of buckshot to go hunting, we got to have that locked down, and if we don't, you got to wait a couple days or whatever it is. So it's really, as someone said, the priorities are really a little bit misplaced at this time from my angle. If we were doing it across the board on everything, that'd be one thing, but we're not. We're absolutely not. That's probably the governor. So I appreciate you guys coming in. If there's no more questions, thank you very much.